Hello, hola, guten tag, ni hao, ciao, and indeed, welcome back to me. I'm sorry it's been a long time since my last tutorial, but as usual, you've heard it all before. I've been very busy, and that is the truth, unfortunately. So I found a little bit of time in between my projects, and it's a Friday, and I've just had some nice lunch, and I'm finding a bit of time to be able to knock out a quick tutorial. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this tutorial of this guy where I just sort of uploaded a play blast the other day of an ice cream. Now the thing about this is I was kind of sitting here one day thinking, wouldn't it be nice if we could just pull geometry apart? So actual Maya geometry, pull it apart, and then make a separate piece of geometry out of that. Not a separate shape node, but a separate piece of geometry. And I just thought, well, how can I do that in a sort of fairly simplistic way that I can show other people and share some knowledge with? So, without further ado, let's crack on. So, got a really complicated cone here, and let's get moving. Now, let's get rid of this grid. Goodbye grid, and we're just going to create a polysphere, and I'm not going to be too crazy about it. Let's just plop that down there. So the entire thing, as you probably guessed, is made with Nparticles. I don't like hard edges, I'm sorry, I just need to sort that out. Yeah, it's made with Nparticles, and then we convert the Nparticles to a mesh. But during the time since I created that playblast and uploaded it to YouTube, I tried some different shapes, and it's very difficult to get it to work on different shapes. It works really well on a sphere, but anything else, well, I'll talk to you about it when we get there. So here we are, a sphere. So the first thing we need to do is go down to our N Dynamics menu and go into the Nparticles menu, and we're going to fill the object, and we're using the water parameter there. So fill object. Let's just open that up, and I've got a resolution of 50. I might just take that down to 40. So these are my settings. I'm going to hit apply. Let's see what we get. I don't want too many balls in there because I don't want to waste anyone's time with all my simulation time. So let's have a look what we've got. There might be too many. Let's just hide the sphere now. I'm just going to put on a separate display layer. Yeah, I'm getting a bit of a slowdown, so I'm just going to go back a couple of steps and just do less. You are of course welcome to do more, and the more resolution Nparticles you've got, the better mesh you're going to end up with. But for this example, as I said, I want to try and speed things along a little bit. So let's hit apply. That'll do. Lovely jubbly. Right, so let's grab the sphere, display layer, hide it. Okay, let's just hide this for a minute so we don't confuse anyone. So I've got a little spade, I'm not sure what you call them really, ice cream spade and spoon, and that's just got some animation on it that just goes through and picks up some of the Nparticles. Obviously when you're dealing with particles and Nparticles and that kind of thing, you want to set your preferences to play every frame. So rather than having to cache it every time, if you've got that left to PAL or NTSC or whatever you're on, then you'll probably get a bit of a warning message down here saying that the nucleus evaluation is too large for your playback. So there we go, straight away we've got the spoon interacting with the Nparticle. And that's basically because the spoon itself is, because I created it earlier, I didn't show you this step, but we just click this little button here that says create passive collider. So that spoon now interacts with the polygons here. Now because this is also a scene that I kind of set up earlier, I've got a few extra things in the outliner already, but that's just all that's going to do is help speed up this lesson a little bit. So when you first create, as you probably know or may not, when you first create an Nparticle system, it also creates a nucleus node, which gives you all of the attributes, including gravity and air density, etc., etc. So on my particular nucleus node, which you'll want to do, I've actually just switched that down to 0. There are other ways to tell these particles not to use the nucleus node in their own attributes, but this is what I've done. I've pulled that down to 0, so just so you know that. And I've just got a standard set of substeps and max collision iterations set as you'd expect. So if we go in and have a little look at the particle itself, going to the attribute editor, and we can see that we've got self-collide off currently. Frictions, it's all default anyway, because I just created this Nparticle in front of you right now, so I haven't touched anything here. We'll just go down into the liquid simulation. That is enabled. Excuse me, that's enabled because when we created the Nparticles, we had water selected, so that will always enable the liquid simulation. And within this, you can change stuff like the viscosity, so you know, like how the difference between water and maybe melted chocolate, that kind of thing. And the incompressibility, well, it's sort of self-explanatory, I guess, but it's just how easily or how difficult it compresses. But I tend not to use any of this, to be honest. So that should be all you need for now. Now, let's get all of my gravity stuff together, and let's open up the go into the window relationship editors and open up your dynamic relationship menu. Okay, so what I've got that you probably can't see here, but I'm going to switch them on now, is a whole bunch of, and let's just switch the other one on as well, a whole bunch of gravity fields. Okay, now there is a reason behind this, so let me just switch them all off. At the moment they're not connected to the Nparticle inside the relationship editor, and if you don't know much about the relationship editor, I'll go through it in a minute, but it's a really handy little tool. So let's just turn all this stuff off at the moment, and at the moment we can tell, because we've got this Nparticle selected, none of these fields are connected to it. If they were, they would be highlighted like this. Okay, so I'm just going to switch them off. So currently what happens when I press play is this: the particles just go off, and that's because we've got a solver gravity down to 0, so the particles are just going off into outer space. It's kind of not the sort of attributes you'd expect when one buys an ice cream. Although it'd be pretty cool if that did happen, and but it doesn't. So there we go. That's not what we want. So there's a few ways of attacking this. One might say, well, why haven't we got any gravity on the nucleus? Well, obviously, if we've got gravity on the nucleus node, then everything's just going to start falling down as soon as we hit play. Well, we don't want that either, because then no one can eat our ice cream. So I have that set to 0. So if that's set to 0, we've got no gravity. How do we get those particles to start falling down? Now, there's a couple of ways of doing it that I've thought about, but trust me, I've been through this before. I've done this tutorial many times over many evenings to try and figure out the simplest way. One might think, well, why can't I just create a gravity field? So let's just do it. Let's just go into fields with the particle selected, go into fields, and we'll create some gravity. Now, the gravity's in the center there. So we know now that if we've pressed play, and because I had that particle selected when I created that field, it's automatically connected to it. So if we select the particle inside the relationship editor, we can see that that particle is indeed highlighted there. Let's just move that over slightly. Oh, maybe not. So, losing my chain of thought. Ever get that? I'm talking about something, and bam, you think of something crazy like a bird flying or something, and then so the gravity is connected to that, and we know that that is just going to start falling down as soon as we press play. Okay, so there are other things you can do inside of a gravity field, which you may or may not know. And you can create some volume control attributes. So you can basically create a volume shape, which for this I thought would be quite good actually. So you can create a sphere, and then basically in or outside of that sphere now, the particles will be affected. So if we just hit play, we can see that the particles are affected when they're inside the sphere, and they're sort of slowly dropping off at the moment. Now, another thing I thought of was there's this little selection here that says volume exclusion, and if you've got that selected, and let's just scale this up a little bit, everything inside that volume will be excluded from the gravity sim, which is great because when they come up here, that's when we want the gravity to start controlling them, which they are. They're all falling down. Obviously it needs some fine tuning, but there's a problem, and you'll see now when this starts to fall down. The problem is when the particles fall back down, you can't really see it here in a moment, when the particles fall back down, the volume exclusion doesn't allow those particles to go back in, and that creates a bit of a problem for us, because when this scooper scoops out a chunk of particles, we're left obviously with a hole, and when we drop that those particles back down, we want them to kind of fall into that hole, and they can't because of this volume exclusion, and so they just sit around the edges again, and it's a really bad look, to be honest, and there's no way around it. I've tried all sorts of different ways of connecting meshes into volume exclusion using the connection editor, and trust me, it doesn't work. So I found, for me personally, being more of a kind of creative artist and not a coder as such, and I'm sure there's a completely simple way of doing it if you can code. For me personally, it was just using a little bit of effort and thought, and just using various gravity fields around this particle shape. So let's just get rid of. Oh, I already got rid of that gravity field. Just to show you what I mean. So currently there's no gravity, and in comes our scooper. Right, fine. So that's fine. But what we want really is we want. Let me just turn on the gravity fields that I've created. Here they are. So these are, and now it looks complicated, but it really isn't. They're just that's a gravity field there. Going to the attributor there, we can see it's a standard gravity field with a magnitude of nearly 50, and I've got a volume shape turned to a cylinder. Obviously earlier we had a sphere, okay, but this is a cylinder. Okay, so everything within inside that volume shape has gravity, and everything outside it doesn't. So I've kind of pointed that that volume shape down towards the Nparticles, and I've done the same with one above. Okay, and because I set this little bunch of fields up with a different simulation, we could probably put it down a bit. Now you'll see something happen here. If you put it down too far, let's connect them all up first, and then we'll start to understand. Nparticle is just connect up all these fields. You can create your own. I won't show you how to create them because it's fairly straightforward, really. Just create a gravity field, turn on, as I said before, turn on a particular shape that you feel is going to lend towards the shape that you need to fit around your particles, and then just space them around. So, but if you put one down too far towards the particles, you'll see that when we start the simulation, boom, they'll get pushed down. Okay, but it's also a good indication of where you want that volume shape to be. So we'll just adjust that a bit, pull it up a bit, and that's cool. It's not touching it, but I know that any particles that go into this volume are going to come back down again. Same here. We can bring that in a bit. Just press play, and if the side pushes in, we've done it too much. No, that's all good. Possibly go a bit more, but I'm just going to try and speed through this. Bring this one down a bit and push that in a bit. Let's try that one. Press play. You see they just pushed in ever so slightly there if you kind of fell away. Alright, so we'll just pull that out a little bit. Alright, that'll do me. Okay, so we've got 3 gravity fields. 4 actually. 4, that's how complicated they look. 4 gravity fields, all pointing in different directions towards our cone, based on our animation. Okay? Which again is a slightly different animation to what I did in the earlier flim flam, but let's see how we go. So they're all falling down. It's going a bit bonkers. We'll sort that in a second. Alright. So let's get our particle. Now the first thing I want to do with the particle itself is we would just want to change a few of the attributes, and they're quite simply things like drag and damp, so that the particle is a little bit more non-responsive to the fields. So with this, I'm going to go on about 20, and damp, I don't know, about 200. And let's just hit play now and just see if they're ever so slightly more non-responsive, but still react. See them all flying off all over the place now, and it gives us a bit more of a sticky kind of feel to it. So everything's not going pow all over the shop. This falls back down, and now they land back on top of each other, which is called and again. Now, because we've created a scoop, that is now a shape that I can't push this cylindrical volume into anymore, because if I did, it would start crushing other parts of the particles. So you have to use your brain a little bit. I created another gravity field, this time as a sphere volume, and as that scoop was made, I don't know if you can see this, but yeah, I animated that sphere to come in and rest just inside that kind of cavity to help bring those particles down into this shape. So yeah, it's cheating, but is it? I mean, at the end of the day, when you create anything visual effects, as long as you get what you're supposed to get out of the end result, it really doesn't matter how you do it, as long as it works and it looks good. So with that said, we could turn off all these gravity fields now and things look a little bit more simple. Hopefully you've stuck with me on that. It's you might need to go over it a couple of times, but it's quite simple really. It's just kind of cheating around it. Now there are other things that I tried. Also, the thing that I wanted to get work, because I was trying a different shape other than this. I was trying to create like a Mr. Whippy. I don't know if you have that in your country or whatever, but it's like an ice cream that's it kind of winds up in a spiral. And I thought, well, I won't be able to use, like decent cylindrical volumes or things like that. How can I get it to work on a complicated shape without having maybe 50 volume fields around it? So what I was trying to do is constrain all of these particles to each other. So obviously within the end constraints of your end menus, you've got a transform constraint, which usually you would kind of use for an end mesh. When you're creating a cloth type object, you may or may not have used an end constraint before. But because we were trying to constrain so many particles to each other, I mean, that worked fine on the shape that I had, and you can introduce gravity then, and then any time one of these particles is pulled away from the constraint, it's then affected by gravity, which is fine. But the simulation was so blisteringly slow, and believe me, I tried it many times. I gave up on it in the end because it just wasn't working out for me. I couldn't use it in my own type of production, to be honest, because it's just taking too long to simulate. I'm sure in the movie places and that you've got other ways of doing this anyway, proprietary software, or you've just got the time to sim. But I haven't, and these constraints weren't working very well at all. And when you pulled the Nparticles away from the constraints and then put them back on top of the Nparticles again, like we're doing here, the particles that had been pulled away from the constraints then reattached themselves to the constraints again, which caused quite an odd look, because who wants to see an ice cream rebuild itself afterwards? That's basically what it was doing. It was rebuilding back to its shape again. And no matter how many different sort of strength fall-offs I created and glue fall-offs I created, it just wasn't working for me. So I do digress a bit, but if you know anything about that kind of side of things, you understand what I'm talking about. Anyway, so we've got our Nparticles, but they don't look much like ice cream at the moment. So the thing we're going to do now is to convert this into a mesh, and obviously we are going to experience a visibility issue straight away. Let's get our old outliner up. So let's just go into the Nparticle's still there, worry not, and we're going to scroll down to not to the output mesh. Where are you, Mr. Meshy? Oh, here's output mesh. I beg your pardon. Right, so the output mesh, and what I like to do personally is just start dialing down the threshold. Right. There we go, until we see something. Right, we're starting to see some ice cream shape, and if you was to play it now, you really wouldn't get much detail at all, but you'll probably get the mesh moving ever so slightly. Right, so okay, so what we need is some more detail, and personally I like to do that by bringing down the triangle size, so it makes the triangle smaller. Okay, so you start to get a little bit more detail in there, and then more detail in there obviously means more detail between the mesh and the particles. So if we hit play now, we'll start to get some sort of movement, more than we had just now. There we go, gloop of ice cream. Alright, looks a bit dodgy, but we can sort that out. Now the other thing I like to use is, because when you start to up the resolution a bit more, using a triangulated mesh excuse me, tends to generate holes, and they're really difficult, almost impossible to fix. So I like to use a tetrahedra, and for me that just gives me a better closed volume. So we can add a bit of smoothing here. We can bring up the smoothing iterations, and you can see that smoothing as we go. Obviously, the more smoothing you get, the slightly slower you get, but also the less detail you would get. So I'm going to leave it on 2 for now. You can also smooth it using standard Maya smooth. You can hit 3 on your keyboard, and you'll probably get a message saying, "Are you mental? You're about to kill your machine with 1,000,000 polys." So you can kind of go between pulling this down and then hitting this. Yes, I'm going to do it because I like loads of polys anyway. And it helps a bit. And then when it's at distance, and then when you've got some kind of smoothing node in Mental Ray on and you render it, it'll look fine. But let's just put it back to 1 for now. So if we hit play, what do we got? Bit slow. Obviously we've got a mesh there now. It's got a fair amount of polys in it. But looking something like the Play Blast that I uploaded a couple of weeks ago. And you can see that the gravity's working alright, and we've got some lumps on top of it, as you'd expect. And obviously, if you wanted some of those lumps to start dripping down, you can play around with the various attributes of the particle itself, the damping. You might want to push one of your gravity fields down a little bit over time. So there you go. Let's not get it wrong. This is not a perfect simulation. This is using my Nparticles, which for this kind of, for doing, well, since Nparticles came out, for doing fluid stuff and all that, it really wasn't the greatest, let's face it. Obviously, I'm still using 2013 here, but obviously with the rise of Bifrost, and now in 2016 Bifrost, someone let me know the other day that it has got viscosity settings in it. Bifrost is probably going to be the way to go. But if you're still on 2013, 12, 11, whatever, 14, and you want to sort of do this with Nparticles, this is the way to do it, I suppose. So yeah, I mean that's kind of it really. Look at that. I mean, you know, there's some deformation there. We are creating new geometry, and what I'm quite happy about really is I set out to do what I wanted to do, which was to pull geometry apart and make new geometry. And there it is, ladies and gentlemen, more geometry. So the other thing we can do is sometimes when if you'll notice, the size of the gorge that we create, the hole that we create in the ice cream, doesn't really equal the amount that's in the spoon. So we've got, you know, a fair amount gone here and a little puddle in there. And it wouldn't matter so much if this was just like a simulation you was using over a character, or you was doing some kind of shot replacement or whatever. And you was at distance, and this was going in someone's mouth anyway. Because let's face it, how often you can create an animation where a spoon picks up the ice cream and then plumps it back down on top of it? Probably never ever in your life, but it was just to sort of, you know, show the method or whatever. I mean, you could plonk it down on the table or on top of a cake, or it could be, you know, this could be used across anything. You know, this could be this you know, particle liquid could be inside this, you know, like one of those cream funnels where they create a name on top of a cake. It could be anything. This is just an example. But what I'm trying to say is there just isn't enough volume inside this compared to the size of the hole that it's making. It just doesn't equal up. So the reason for that is it's nothing to do with the incompressibility and all that of the liquid simulation. It's to do with the particles themselves. And the reason for that is, if we can just show the particles, let's show the particles. I remember how to do this. Yeah, so with the particles selected, just go down to, where's our output? Object display, okay? If you turn off intermediate object, right, you'll see your particles again. There's a little trick for you. So you know, and obviously, if you want to get back to your mesh and play or delete your mesh even, and you want your particles back, that's where it is. It's inside the particle node, and you have to turn under object display. You have to turn on intermediate object from to disappear and from to appear again. Turn that off, and then you can delete your mesh as well if you want, and your particles will be there, and you're back again, and then you can mesh it again if you want, if you've come across some problems. We could just hide the mesh for now. So yeah, we can see the reason for it. The reason for it is that we've only got like one layer of particles sitting in here. So obviously we've got the mesh over the top of it, and all the mesh is doing is looking at those particles and fitting around the outside of it. You see? So, well, how can we make that bigger? Because, you know, you obviously picked up enough particles. The problem is that the particles aren't colliding with each other, so they're not creating any mass volume between each other. They're just sinking into each other. So if we just hide that mesh again, we can see they've all intersected and sunk into each other, and that isn't what we want if we're trying to create some kind of bigger globular effect. So let's just have a look at that. Now, making them collide comes with a whole host of its other problems. But we'll look at it. Actually, I'm going to hide it again because we're going to look at the particle simulation. So, with the particles selected, sorry if I'm speaking a bit fast and whatnot. I'm just trying to squeeze this in. We can turn on self collide. So these particles are going to collide with each other, as you'd expect now, and because they collide with each other, they're going to sit on top of each other and whatnot. But they might do it a little bit too much for our liking. So let's just have a look. Let's play the simulation. Oh, well, that's not too bad. Obviously, we could do some tweaks because, like, you know, these particles. Now, you know, now we've got particle collision. They're all like, well, hey, there's loads of us, and we're all going to sit on top of each other. Now our spoon's not even thick enough for the amount of particles that we've selected, and they're all rolling off the edge. So there are a few ways you can deal with this, and you just got to kind of think, not outside the box, because it's not like Einstein type stuff, but it's just sort of thinking, I'd call it real world really. I mean, these particles could be more sticky, so that when you do pick them up, they tend to not want to fall away from each other. So let's try that. Take the stickiness, like, you know, off the scale, and see if that makes any difference at all. So we've got a few less. That's not so bad. But obviously, if it's not the look you're going for, because when they come out, they're going to come out in one big chunk, I imagine. But we've still got some rogue ones around here, and it's, you know, it's probably not the best way of doing it. But you know, it could work. It could work. And obviously, there's a mesh around it. It's all going to look different anyway. So yeah, maybe a bit of stickiness. Let's bring the stickiness down a little bit. But the other thing you can do is look at the solver display of the collision objects themselves. So currently we're just looking at the Nparticle as the Nparticle, but it's got another side, the dark side. If you go into, you've got inside solver display underneath the collisions tab. You've got collision thickness, so we can click on that and we see everything goes yellow. Or we've got self collision thickness, and you shouldn't see anything change at all because it's the same size. So collision thickness is, as you'd expect, this is the thickness of its collision exterior, you know, so anything that touches that yellow, well, if this yellow touches that yellow, then they'll collide and create an effect. And its self-collision thickness is how they interact with each other, i.e. sitting on top of each other inside the spoon. Now you can make those bigger and smaller, so the smaller we make the self-width scale, as you see, you can interactively change it. So if we took it down to like 0, that was just like having it off, like having like having the attribute self-collide switched off. So we don't really want that. But we could bring it up a bit, it's kind of in between, so that they're not going as bonkers as they are now, but they're also giving us an extra little bit of volume inside our spoon. So that might be what we want. So if we just rewind back and try, it might just be just enough for us to say, yeah, do you know what, rock and roll, we're done. So let's have a quick simulation again. So you can see they are compressing a bit. If you have a look up in here, they're compressing, they are intersecting with each other, but not as much as they were. And some of these rogue ones you won't even see when it's been meshed. It depends on your threshold and the resolution of your mesh. But you know, it might be enough in here to give you an extra bit of volume. You think, yeah, that's cool, that looks good for me. And if it's not, up it a bit or take it down a bit. The other thing you can do, if you want more of an effect of, well, you know, usually ice cream would stick more to this object, is because it's a passive object, it's also got its own n-rigid shape, so you can bring up or down the stickiness. So if we want those particles to pretty much stay in there, we could like whack that stickiness scale all the way up to the end, and that would give you that effect. So let's just turn on the mesh again, show the selection, and let's go to the Nparticle and go down to object display and turn on intermediate objects. So now we're just dealing with our mesh, and let's hit play. Should we give it a bit of colour while we're here? Let's just do it rendering quick. Let's just go bosh, and we'll just go over, I don't know, a bit of all white really, that'll do. Yeah, I'm not going to colour anything else, waste your time. So here we go. There we go, there's a nice little bit of contact there. We can see we've got more in our spoon, and the spoon's going to turn over and do its thing. So how you all doing anyway? I haven't spoken to you guys for ages, not that we ever speak anyway, but oh yeah, come over to the Facebook page. I occasionally, when I remember, post some stuff on there. It's usually trailers or tutorials or whatever, and just come over to the Facebook page. It's on the link on the channel banner. Come have a look. Follow me on Twitter as well. That's on the channel banner. Just trying to sort of grow the whole social networking thing between people. And the other thing, I am considering creating a massive Maya Foundation bunch of tutorials, teaching in the way that I teach, doing things the way I do. I personally think I can teach you Maya a lot quicker than I learnt Maya. I went to a fairly prestigious 3D and visual effects training centre in London for quite a while and spent quite a lot of money. And although it's excellent at the time, Very early on, they wasn't as together as they are now. But I know them all. They're great. They're an awesome studio. But I, personally, having had to leave after doing the training and then continue my my learning on my own, I've now got to a stage where I basically just think I can teach you 3D a lot quicker than other places. I'm going to come out and say it. So yeah, I am going to create a big foundation course for Maya, and that's going to move into intermediate stuff. I'm going to try and keep it fun and also cool. I might use some real world stuff that I've done before, some projects. It's probably, obviously I'm going to charge for it. It's not just going to be free on YouTube. But there's this thing on YouTube now where you can charge people to actually look at the video. So you pay an amount. Maybe it would be like a playlist, and you pay an amount, and then you can get into that playlist. And it's not going to be a lot of money. I'm not talking a lot of money here at all. I'm talking anyone in any country will be able to afford this. I'm very, very mindful of education being almost free, but with the time and effort I have to put in it, there has to be a little bit of something back. You know what I mean? You just got to be a bit give and take here. But I'm mostly giving. But in my mind, I kind of think, well, if enough people view it, then I'll make a little bit of money out of it, and all you guys can get a lot of education at the same time. And if it's not a lot of money, then I can't have loads of people coming after me with sticks and shotguns and stuff, saying I've spent a lot of money with you and I didn't like your training. So I kind of get around that as well. But you wouldn't come and get training from me if you didn't know me and like my videos anyway. Anyway, that's it. We've sort of done it, haven't we? Yeah, that's done. I just created a bit of a funky thing there, but it's cold out, so it froze really quickly, I reckon. Anyway, that's it for now. 36 minutes. That's a very long tutorial. Sorry if I digressed halfway through about going on about volumes and all things like that, but I don't really talk to many people. I work on my own quite a lot, and it's sometimes just got to get it out, man. You just got to get it out. But that's it. Thanks, guys. Thanks for sticking with me. Please, there are going to be some more tutorials. I promise you. I promise from my heart there's going to be more. But come and follow me and pester me, badger me for things you want to see. And what I have to do is look at groups of ideas. So if like one person says, oh, I want to see an animated dinosaur pick up snot and then tread on it with a trainer, but there's 10 guys that want a quick modelling tutorial, then I kind of have to lean towards that, and so I have to look at those sort of things. But anyway, have a lovely weekend. It's nice to speak to you all, even though we didn't speak, and I will speak to you all again soon. Be good to each other. Thank you. Bye bye.